Good morning and good afternoon to everyone that has joined. I'd like to introduce the individuals that will be speaking on our call today. My name is Jodi Madsen. I'm the Regional Sales Director for Foresite Cybersecurity. With us, we have Philip Wylie, the Offensive Security Expert at Horizon3, and Chuck Flynn, our Principal Security Solution Architect here at Foresite Cybersecurity. Philip, would you like to talk about Horizon3 and go on to the overview slide?
Yes. So thanks everyone for joining. So Horizon3 was founded in 2020. The headquarters is in San Francisco. It's a cybersecurity startup providing autonomous pen testing. So there's 200 employees in the US and EMEA, 25 million ARR, growing 100% year over year, 80 million raised through Series C funding back in October 23. Another stat that we don't have listed here, but we were on the Forbes next billion-dollar startup list. Really interesting, great product. I come from a pen testing background, so I'm used to the manual way of doing things. When I first saw Node Zero, I did not realize that you could automate pen testing that much. I'd worked on pen testing teams where we had some automation using what they call wrapper scripts, where you take several scripts and tools and kind of chain together to do automation, but nothing at the level of this. It's kind of just before we kind of get into the details a little more, Node Zero is like the next evolution in pen testing. You had, at one time, you didn't have vulnerability scanners. You didn't have things like Metasploit. It was all manual, and this was actually before my time. I've been in the offensive security side for over 12 years, but it was all done manually. But to keep up with the amount of testing, there needs to be evolution. So we had vulnerability scanners, which helped evolve and help scale what we're doing, and tools like Metasploit and various other great pen testing tools, but it's still not enough. I used to work at a large US bank. We had 13 people on our pen test team, and we were only able to get through half of our PCI pen testing each year. If we'd had a product like Node Zero, we could have tested that same environment multiple times a year. So we have over 200 global partners, resellers, MSPs, MSSPs, consulting companies use us, marketplace and alliances. So one of the things is to see that a lot of times you'll see individual companies and MSPs using a product, but when you have like MSPs buying in, consultants using this as one of their tools to scale what they're doing, then that's got to tell you something. It's a SaaS delivery model. It deploys in less than 15 minutes. So you either use a Docker container or you download an OVA file and create a VM. So it's very easy to use. And what I would say, it's just as easy as a vulnerability scanner, and it's less difficult to install.
Like to talk about our organization, Foresite?
Certainly. Hi, everybody. Yes, Foresite Cybersecurity. We were established or founded in 2013, focusing on cybersecurity, governance, and GRC in general. We've been doing this for just over 10 years now. We have roughly 2,000 to 2,300 clients today. We do actually maintain a 96% retention rate, and we have two SOCs. We have one SOC here in Kansas, Oakland Park actually, and another one just outside of London in the UK. And typically we use them to separate delivery. So the UK model delivery happens from the UK SOC, and the US delivery happens from the US SOC. But they are there in case we have to use like a DR type of thing. We can't help each other. So we do have redundancy that way. There's not a whole lot more to tell. And there's another slide, I think. No, I'm sorry. I apologize. Bill, back to you.
Sure. So we kind of get into our presentation for the day. So traditional pen testing, your typical cadence is annual to biannual. Some cases, companies only have the time, the budget for an annual pen test, relying on vulnerability management to detect CVEs between pen tests, which this is not the best way of doing things, because sometimes some of these CVEs that you find with the vulnerability scanner may be a false positive. There's some instances where we had a use case where a customer had a vulnerability, I think it was Print Nightmare, that Nexpose was showing as not vulnerable, and CrowdStrike showed it as not being vulnerable, but Node Zero was able to exploit it. So using a vulnerability scanner between is not really optimal. This is using, something like Node Zero kind of gives you a better better effect, better results from it. Time limitations affect efforts of pen tests. There's kind of fatigue with the testers, the number of people that you have to perform the test. Kind of sharing the example earlier with the bank that I work for, there were 13 of us. We weren't able to get through only half of the pen tests. So not really being able to scale the way we needed to. And as you know, compliance really kind of drove the growth of pen testing, but sometimes it kind of limits the pen testing. So maybe a company has a budget for pen testing, but it's all allocated towards PCI, and there's other critical environments that need to be tested, because there's not only the CDE data that's in those, in those environments with the card data, there's also PII. Sometimes there's different health insurance, health information. There's also, PI, also intellectual property, all sorts of things that have to be detected, have to be protected, but get overlooked by the limitations of the time. Pen testing is referred to as a time box test, or kind of a snapshot of your security posture in time. It's constantly changing. Every time you add a new employee, add new applications to the environment, make changes, then you're introducing threat vectors to your landscape, making things, more vulnerable. So these are constantly changing. When you have Patch Tuesday comes out, one of our customers said, if you have a Patch Wednesday, you really need or Patch Tuesday, you need a pen test Wednesday. And this is a good thought, that you're able to go back and test to see if those have been remediated. And also, too, threat actors will wait for these Patch Tuesdays to come out to go reverse engineer the patches, or figure out ways around those patches on the certain vulnerabilities. So this is also an opportunity for those threat actors and vulnerability researchers alike to find ways to bypass and exploit the latest patch. Next slide. So traditional gaps, so not frequent enough, pen testing duration too short, steps missed due to manual pen testing. So if you think about it, you have your methodology, you have your run books for performing pen tests, and this next bullet point here kind of adds on to that, or kind of helps build that story out a little bit more, because you got the pen testers fatigue. You're fatigued. You're doing so much testing late hours, doing a lot of testing, and maybe you miss a step in that. So if you automate testing, then one of the things you can do is you're automating your run book in a way. You're going through and making sure all those steps are performed. Tester fatigue, you get tired, you miss things. And then sometimes you're actually just taking a sampling of that environment. Sometimes due to budget constraints, time constraints, companies are only doing a sampling. They're testing similar systems in their environment, not the whole thing, and just kind of hoping that their environment is identical to that sampling, that things come out. And that's not always the case. So autonomous pen testing. So this is one of the ways that we can address the gap. So more frequent testing. With Node Zero, you can test one test after another. So you pretty much can schedule the test to run continuously in your environment, longer testing durations. You're also not having the element of the fatigue of the tester, because pen testing, you work some kind of crazy hours. I've had pen tests where I couldn't start until midnight, or my test hours were from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. So that can be kind of tiring on your testers. And when you get tired, you miss things. So you're able to test longer without worrying about the tester's availability. You're able to schedule this. You set up a runner where you're able to run these pen tests. And so you can schedule these to run whenever you want to. Autonomous decision-making avoids missteps or skip steps. As we kind of mentioned, the fatigue, and then kind of you have your run book, your steps, methodology for the pen test. Sometimes those get skipped. Sometimes it's even a matter of lesser experienced people on your team, bringing someone in new. That's where one of the advantages to Node Zero is you can take a junior security consultant, IT analyst, and have them up running the tool, being able to perform advanced testing that would take otherwise years to get someone up to that level, because they say it takes 10,000 hours to become an expert. And you think of the number of years it takes to get to that level. The lessons learned from all the pen tests done with Node Zero helps build the functionality out where we're able to do things in a more quicker fashion. For instance, I think last year they said it took like 4 minutes to get domain admin compromise. Now we're down to 2 minutes domain admin compromise. If you take a really skilled pen tester, you're talking maybe 4 hours to 8 hours. If they do it quickly, we're able to do that in 2 hours. With the lessons learned and constant improvement of the tool, we're able to do that faster. So one of the things that Node Zero does as well, we use a lot of open source tools under the hood, Nmap, Zmap, and we're using the best tool for that process. So we're doing our reconnaissance. It's interesting because you can look at the console during that test, and we'll run Zmap first. So Zmap is running because it's quicker and easier to enumerate the host. It detects all the hosts, does minimal scanning, then it passes it off to Nmap where you're doing service scanning, doing more detailed, getting the information, and then in the background, machine learning is making the decision of what's the best next step using graph theory, being able to go through, make those decisions to make it more automated, make the automation more better in the steps so that they're able to conduct that in a quicker fashion, optimize what you're doing. And even during the test too, there are some risks that you can risk to pen testing. And we have our pen tests are production safe. And when you're conducting your pen test, it gives you the option. There are some higher risky tests to do, the higher risks, and the medium risks are listed in yellow. So for instance, if it's something that could cause an issue, it's listed in yellow. And you take something like Bluekeep that you could possibly have to reboot the system because of Bluekeep, it's notated in red. And it doesn't automatically run those. You have to run those. Although if you don't run those steps, it will go through and tell you if you're vulnerable to those certain vulnerabilities. You can actually run the actual test if you want to. So it makes that really easy to set up. And we also include your cloud too. We don't overlook the cloud. We also include the cloud because we're in hybrid environments now. The days of totally on-prem are kind of behind us. That's something you don't see as well. Most companies are using a combination of cloud on-prem. And so it's giving you faster and continuous results and reporting. And one of the nice things is too, is the one-click verify. Say you've run your pen test, you've done your remediation, you're able to go back and do a one-click verify to check and make sure that it's been validated. If you're hiring a pen test company, you run your pen test, you have them come back, do a retest to see if there's any vulnerabilities. And so that provides that. So you're able to easily do that. You're able to see the impact. So we're not only just throwing a bunch of CVEs, high risk, critical, high, mediums. We're showing the impact. We're giving you attack maps on how we were able to get in, where we got the foothold, what we're able to do with that, dumping credentials. And sometimes people think that it's just the critical vulnerabilities you have to worry about. So that we have got use case where we had an instance where they were using ILO in their systems. A lot of companies have ILO, the integrated lights out. It's a management card built into that server where you can reboot the system, perform remote access, remote administration to that system. And you wouldn't think that compromising that password would make a difference, but there is a vulnerability where you can run this script, add a user to that ILO card, and through that testing, Node Zero was able to take passwords from that, reuse the passwords to perform tests internally, and those passwords were being used internally on admin accounts. So we were able to get like domain compromise from that vulnerability, chaining that together. So it's not always the CVEs. Sometimes it's the configuration. We're also using passwords from password breaches because a lot of pen testers nowadays, the way you're having to get a foothold because security environments are getting more difficult to gain a foothold, but we're using things like password spraying. So Node Zero does that as well. It takes compromised passwords, compromised password lists. It also uses default credentials and uses those against those systems to gain a foothold. And so it scales traditional pen testing teams as a force multiplier. We've got customers that were performing one pen test a year. Now they're doing as high as 30 or 40 a month. And it's interesting to see that curve. When they first started, it's a lot of high impact, high criticality vulnerabilities. But as time goes on, they're finding things, but it's less critical and less impact. So Node Zero is helping you focus on what is, important, because when you run a vulnerability scan, you get thousands of vulnerabilities. You don't know what to focus on. Some of them are listed as critical and high. And sometimes we see some of these vulnerabilities come out. And this is where pen testing is important. There's some of these vulnerabilities that get announced that it's a chain of a perfect setup to be able to exploit that system. So there has to be so many things misconfigured for it to happen, but it's still listed as critical. But unless you pen test it, you're not really going to be able to know whether you can do that or not. Next slide. And so just to
Chuck?
yeah, so we can go a little bit deeper. We've got a little more time, so kind of got through the slides built a little bit fast, but some of the different use cases are pretty interesting that we're seeing in this environment. As I mentioned, people are testing more frequently, where before in the past it takes more time. Some of the competing products, they have to send out a laptop to be set up in an environment, and sometimes that can be kind of a hassle, because some cases companies are running network access control, so you can't just easily plug in a laptop to the system. You have to make sure that it's allowed in the system, make sure it's connecting properly. With Node Zero, as I mentioned earlier, it's an easy, less than 15-minute install. So you're on a system that already has access to your network. You run it from there, so you're up and running more quickly. We actually recently added a new product called Tripwires, and Tripwires uses deception technology. So if you have critical vulnerabilities in high, we don't always have time to remediate those right away. But with Tripwires, it's a deception technology, and we drop tokens on those critical systems. So that way, if anyone is trying to access that system, try to exploit that system between the time of discovery and remediation, you're able to detect that. So you're able to watch those. So it's kind of something that gives you peace of mind between discovery and remediation. And the product's constantly growing. So we've recently enhanced our cloud capabilities. And so really, this is really, like is mentioned, it's a force multiplier. This is kind of the next evolution in pen testing. I predict that within the next 5 years, if not sooner, all companies will be using some type of autonomous pen testing, because it's just really hard to keep up with the growing digital landscape. And as companies add more and more systems to their environment, things that you see as well as shadow IT with cloud, it makes it a lot easier to spin up instances. Marketing groups will sometimes use microservices to run campaigns. And with all this constant change, we really need to be constantly testing our environment. As mentioned, it's a force multiplier. You're able to conduct continuous pen testing.
Chuck, would you like to review cybersecurity services from Foresite, please?
Sure. Yeah, so I'll do a couple of things here. So this slide is, again, a high-level view, or not even high-level, moderate-level view of the services that Foresite offers. And I'll give you a quick summary, and then I'll talk a little bit about our review and approach on how we take the Node Zero tool and wrap our services around it, and why it makes it such a great idea. So again, Foresite Cybersecurity, we're a full MSSP shop. We have 3 practices. We have the compliance and GRC practice, where you're going to find vCISO services, assessment services, all that good stuff. We have our managed services, which is where we have the 24/7 SOC, the monitoring, the alerting, patch management, vulnerability programs, managed Tanium, things like that. And on the third tower, or the third practice, is our testing practice. And this is where we run all the vulnerability assessments and all the pen testing and all the ASV scanning and other assessments like that. And what we do is we have embraced the Node Zero tool, because what that does is it allows our team to be far more efficient, right? So instead of, and I think you've heard it earlier, tester fatigue. You have 3, 4, 5,000 IP addresses, and you're testing manually. The first 200 are going to be tested very differently than the last 200, right? People are just going to get tired. They're going to say, I haven't seen this script hit anything the whole entire time. I'm going to skip a script. Testers get tired. That's kind of what happens. With the Node Zero tool, the first script, the first IP is going to be interrogated just as diligently as the last. With their backend, with their AI, I guess, model, it's able to model out the best way through the environment based on what it's learning about the environment. And I know Phil said it's production safe, right? It's definitely production safe. The beauty of that is that you could run it during the day, during the night. You could run it continuously if you wanted to. And it really gives you everything you know about what's actually exploitable in your environment. The tool itself has 0 false positives. So we know everything on a report is because the tool was able to find a weakness, exploit that weakness, gather data, take a screenshot of that data for the report, and then move on to the next step. And I know the retesting has always been important. As Phil mentioned, we always allow for retesting when we do manual testing within 90 days. With the Node 0 model, not only can you retest it as often as you like, but as you're going through and you're looking at the results and you're looking at the output, you could sort them by the weakness found. And then you can select them all and add them to one-click verify. The tool's going to go verify just that one weakness was corrected. It doesn't have to rescan everything or all the highs and mediums and lows. It's just going to go after that one weakness. So we find the tool to be absolutely wonderful. Couple stories that I could tell. I can tell one specifically, and I think we have a use case coming up here. We had a client. It was a financial systems client. They had about 5,300 different endpoints, and they had all the tooling you can imagine. If it was on the Gartner quadrant, they had it out there. It was all rolled out. It was all managed centrally. However, they were using sampling for their pen testing to make sure they didn't have, they didn't want to spend the hour of the time to do each and every one of them. So they were doing sampling. Well, this tool was rolled out into that environment, and in about 25 minutes, it identified 3 out of that 5,000 plus endpoints that had misconfigurations, and each one of those misconfigurations led to domain admin compromise. And this tool was able to do that in about 25 minutes. So that's just one example of the thoroughness of the tool. And Jodi, if you want to go to the next slide, I think we have a another use case here. So this one was in another financial installation, a different one. This was a bank that was looking to kind of revolutionize or bring to the modernize their penetration testing model. They were doing regular pen testing every quarter, and what they wanted to do was take the same methodology that they use for vulnerability scanning, where you're doing continuous vulnerability scanning and reporting, and they wanted to approach that with pen testing. And what we worked with them to set up is the ability for them to do testing pretty much every 24 hours in certain networks. They set up a couple different runners, and they were able to run in certain high priority networks every 24 hours. They were doing a penetration test, and this allowed them to see in near real time anytime something popped up or got misconfigured, or a patch or an update was applied wrong, or if they rolled out a new server and it goes through their golden image process, but it wasn't fully updated before it was put in production. This allowed them to catch a lot of those mistakes. So I don't know if we have any questions yet or not, but I don't think I have any more slides after this one. Yes, questions.
Jack, did you want to just review how our services are wrapped around the H3?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I can explain that to you. Yeah, so what we do is it makes our testing team far more efficient, and that allows us to do a lot more pen testing engagements than we normally would be able to at time. And how we accomplish that is we work with our clients to do the initial configuration. We set up the scans, we schedule the scans, we teach them how to use the tool a little bit, and then we actually run a scan for them. We take the output of that scan, we go through the report, we review it with them. They might have specific questions about specific high or critical findings. We'll actually manually verify those if they want us to. And then we give them that report with the recommendations. And we do that each and every quarter with our clients. So they have quarterly consultant-led pen tests that they can hand that report, and we can stand behind it to an auditor or to a regulator. While at the same time, the clients have access to the tool, so they can go through, use this tool, do as many testing, as many interrogations as they would like to within their environment.
Great, thank you so much. I wanted to just go over some questions that we have in the chat. The first question is currently, and this is directed towards Phil. We have both Horizon 3. It just went away. I'm not sure where the question just went.
Yeah, I actually remember the question. I guess there it is. So yeah, it said currently we use both Horizon 3 for autonomous pen testing, UpGuard for third-party risk assessments. We run monthly pen tests across our environments. Are there any plans for Horizon 3 to offer integrations with third-party risk management tools like UpGuard? One thing I'd recommend is if you have any items you'd like to have integrated, just reach out to us, info@horizon3.ai, and recommend that. But I do believe there's some things on the roadmap because they're starting to see the need for that. Of course, one of the things I have to say, just to kind of show the mindset and the vision behind Horizon 3, just like adding the tripwires, adding deception technology. Who would have thought about that in offensive tool? A lot of times with offensive tooling, vulnerability assessment type tools, they're all focused on finding vulnerabilities and exploiting, not really doing anything else. So I do know that they're looking at adding functions for like GRC. So as far as specific tools like UpGuard, I'm not sure. We have APIs that can be integrating tools, but this could be, from what I understand, I think on the roadmap, we're starting to work towards some things that would be used for GRC and compliance and risk management type stuff.
Great. Our second question is, can you explain about external IP pen test? I'm not sure exactly what the specific question is regarding.
So I can speak back to that one a little bit. The way that the architecture works is to do an internal pen test, they'd have to have a runner or a scanning engine inside the environment so it can route to the target IPs. If it's an external pen test, it would be scanned from the Horizon AI cloud, and it would use its own scanner. So you would not have to set up a scanner to perform an external pen test. It would happen directly from their infrastructure.
Thanks, Chuck. Last question we have on the list is, do you give your customers access to the GUI or only the report? I'm worried that our customers will leave. We'll give that to Chuck.
So it depends on your role, right? If you're like an MSSP like we are, we do give access to our customers to the interface. We wrap services around it. We act as that helpful advisor, whether it's configuration or analyzing or reviewing the output of the scan. If you were acting as an MSSP, I guess that would be kind of a decision you would make. But from the Foresite perspective, we do provide access to that. We see the tools powerful, and we like the idea that a customer can be more actively engaging in regular, almost continuous pen testing.
Thanks, Chuck. This question is for Phil. Do you support black box testing?
Yes, because actually we take a black box approach from the point of view of we don't have any kind of, there's no kind of accounts used to test it. So that's really a black box approach. If you really want to get really technical on black box, you just know that this is the company you're going to test and you have to do all the enumeration, but we do typically what would be considered a black box approach. We're not requiring any kind of access, any kind of accounts to test it. So yeah, it is a black box approach unless you decide to use credentials during the testing. Great question.
Thank you.
And Phil, I'm sorry, Phil, I'd say it'd be fair to say you could support either black or gray box because you have the ability to add credentials if you wanted to during the test.
Yes, I agree. Even white box testing with adding the credentials, but yeah, good points there.
Thank you. Next question is RMM tools ? Ticketing like Ninja One. So I believe they're asking, are there any remote monitoring tools or types of ticketing for Ninja One and etc.?
Yeah, I believe they're asking about integrations to those tools with this. Phil, do you want to talk to that?
Yeah, we do some third-party integrations because we've had integrations set up for like PlexTrack for reporting because we have some consulting companies using that. Ticketing, I'm not really sure. I think that may be on the roadmap to add some ticketing so that way you can assign tickets through that, but I'm not really certain on that. But if you if you reach out to info@Horizon3.ai, we can answer any kind of questions like that on integration. But they're constantly working on more integrations to expand the tool, because our motto here is offensive driven defense. So we're really pushing to do more than just the offensive side. We're doing things to enhance the defensive side as well.
Great. And I can answer the last question we have in queue, which is, do you charge your pen testing by annual or unlimited or by individual pen test? The model that we use is we determine how many IPs you have in your environment and put you into a tier. Once you're in that tier, you can have unlimited pen tests on the number of IPs that are in that tier for the entire year. Okay, so I don't see any other questions in the queue. I wanted to thank our speakers and our audience for joining us today. And if you have any further questions that come up after this call, please contact info@horizon3.ai, or you can contact me directly at jodi.madsen@foresite.com, and we'll look forward to hearing from you. Thank you and have a great afternoon.